So I will call this meeting of the Lake Mill City Council to order for February 4th of 2025. Misty, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Gerler?
Here.
Ms. Schmager?
Here.
Ms. Quidnow?
Here.
Mr. Fields?
Here.
Mr. Waters?
Here.
Thank you.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So our next agenda item is Councilmember Board Reports and Acceptance of Meeting Minutes. So we have the City Council minutes from January 21st of 2025 and the Plan Commission meeting minutes from November 26th of 2024. Are there any questions or corrections on either of these minutes? Okay, seeing none, we'll accept both of these minutes into our public record. Next is correspondence. So, Mr. Fields, I'll start on my left side with you.
I just had the one email I think we all received on the 3/4 ton pickup truck.
Mary.
I also had correspondence on the winter parking ordinance, parcel on County Highway B, water level order, and an inquiry about how to report street light that's out, and I sent them to our website, which was an easy reporting process after I checked it out.
Great.
I just had the same email that Mr. Fields outlined.
Great. Michelle?
The only ones I have to add is that I had 2 emails with regard to state superintendent of the state superintendent nominees.
Okay. Great, thanks. I also had the winter parking, the street department truck, and I received a comment about the Durant property, a comment about Rock Creek Apartments proposed expansion, which was on the Plan Commission agenda last week, and some updates on Club 55 and some of the activities that they've been doing in the community and at the senior center. And then I also had a chance to attend the fire department annual awards dinner, and that is really a nice event. It was a great opportunity to interact with some of the firefighters in a different setting than, seeing them out doing their jobs. And I think some of you have had a chance to go in the past. So if you haven't, I recommend doing that sometime. It was a really nice evening. Okay, I guess that's it for correspondence then, so we'll move on to questions and public comment. The public is encouraged to address the council at this time regarding items on the agenda. Public comments may also be made on items that are not on the agenda if you have registered with the city clerk before the meeting has been called to order. The state's open meetings law discourages actions by the council on items not listed on the agenda. Please keep your comments limited to 3 minutes. State your name and address when starting your comments and fill out the sign-in sheet provided. If there's anyone attending online, please type your name and address in the chat feature. So I know we have one individual here in the room, so if you want to come on up, Chris. I don't see anyone online, but we'll keep an eye on that.
Hi, Chris Lopak, 419 Campus Street. Great to see all of you again. In light of the detailed presentation by the Ad Hoc Committee on Urban Forest Management last month, I'm asking for you to once again reconsider the resolution where a neglected city-owned tree that was never inspected fell on city-owned power lines, causing significant damage. First off, I want to say Jeanette gave an incredible and passionate presentation. That was an absolutely wonderful presentation. We're lucky to have her in our neighborhood. Also, Mary, I want to say thank you for inquiring about the mature trees and the risks of mature trees. Your particular question really is near and dear to my heart right now, as you know what's going on over the last couple months. I want to revisit a couple quotes from that meeting and from that committee. The first one being from our Parks Director, Eric, who said, "Pruning and structural pruning is absolutely critical in defining the actual structure of the tree itself. With pruning, potential storm damage can be mitigated. The amount of time we spend on pruning does correlate to the less damages that could potentially occur." I'm going to repeat that. The amount of time we spend on pruning does correlate to the less damages that could potentially occur. Additionally, the committee said proper maintenance and monitoring of mature trees can prevent much of the concern. A lot of those concerns are preventable through the inspections that the city provides of all the trees, but that trimming is critical. To revisit my particular claim, the city showed up to my house, informed me that neither of the trees existed in their database, which means they've never been inspected. Additionally, the arborist showed up to my house and said that the silver maple is known for splitting. So I'd like to think, going off of our own Parks Director's comments, this could have been avoided. Additionally, one tree in my terrace still has a power line going through it, where there has no action been taken still. Another interesting take from January's meeting was asking the community to help with additional trees and resources in the future. And while I'm all in favor of a community effort, as that's what small towns are all about, I don't understand how we can be in this room right now and be serious about looking to residents to help with that initiative when people are left to pick up the bill for any and all damage from the trees we currently have. And when businesses downtown are left without power for hours during peak business hours. Those businesses and us citizens are this community. When I was here in December, Greg, you mentioned to the woman from Oakland that it's important to be a good neighbor and help out. Do you remember that? When we were talking about the ambulance service? Am I not your neighbor? Mary, you came to my house, hand-delivered your candidacy information. We talked in my front yard. Lisa, I emailed you to talk over a cup of coffee, not as city council versus disgruntled taxpayer, but as friends, as neighbors. Instead, I simply received a call from the city attorney to inform me that these city council meetings are not the place to work through this, and the only option is to go to court. But that's not even true, Dan. Dan should know that Wisconsin's open meetings law, state statute 19.81 through 19.98, allows for my resolution to be reconsidered. If a resolution has already been passed and the meeting has ended, there are two options. The council may rescind or amend the resolution at a future meeting. And who can propose this? Any city council member, regardless of how they voted on the original resolution. The item must be placed on the meeting agenda with proper public notice under Wisconsin's open meeting law. From there, a simple majority vote is usually needed to amend or rescind. Thank you again. I know I went long and I'm sorry, but please reconsider. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else in the room. Misty, I don't see anyone else online. Is there anyone?
Nobody else online.
Okay. With that, then, we will close the public comment period for this evening. Our next agenda item is the city manager's report. Drake?
Just a few items. We will be debuting a new website in February, so keep a lookout for an email. There will be a new domain. So we will publish it through social media as well as we'll send it directly to you, but we will have a new website. The water level order was received as of last Friday by the DNR. And so they are currently processing our application. And then absentee voting began today here at City Hall.
That's for the April election?
The February primary.
February primary. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Drake?
Question.
Oh, Mary, yes.
Do we have any updates on any of the, like, any action that is moving forward on the strategic priorities that we discussed back in September? Like the wastewater treatment plant or any pre-work on helping prep some for the Sandy Beach conversation or our downtown efforts? Any studies or anything we have going on for any of this?
Oh, you'll get some information prior to the work session on Sandy Beach. City engineer and city planner will be available at that meeting to walk through history and past action on the previous planning efforts that have undergone over the last several years. Wastewater treatment plant will come up in the coming months, still working with the engineer on the next steps for the city council after our conversation at the end of the year.
Thanks. Great. Anything else from council members? Okay, thank you. So next we'll move on to council business. And our first item is a consent agenda. There are 3 items on the consent agenda, and we have a memo reminding us about that process. So if there is any council member that would like to remove any of the items from the consent agenda, you can do so at this time. Otherwise, I would ask for a motion to approve the entire consent agenda.
Make a motion to approve the 3 items on the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Waters and a seconded by Ms. Schmager. And part of the process for consent agenda is there's no discussion, so we will move right to roll call vote. Please, Misty.
Ms. Schmager,
Aye.
Ms. Quidnow,
Aye.
Mr. Fields,
Aye.
Mr. Waters,
Aye.
Ms. Curler.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Our next item is Resolution 25-06, which is confirming our Deputy City Clerk. Misty, would you read that title for us?
City Council Resolution 25-06, confirmation of city manager appointment of deputy city clerk.
I move to approve City Council Resolution 25-06, confirmation of city manager appointment of deputy city clerk.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Quidnow and a second by Mr. Waters. Drake, would you like to introduce our new Deputy City Clerk?
Sure, this is one of a handful of appointments that require city council confirmation. My appointment is Lisa Vincent. She has been with the city as our court clerk for some time now. We will be, so she will be taking on a dual role, so she'll be handling the duties of both. We're very excited, very happy to have her on board, and we think it's going to be a great fit for both of us, for the city and for Lisa, and she's already gotten started on a lot of the roles and is fitting right in. So I think it's going to be an excellent working relationship there.
Great, thank you. And we all got a chance to meet Lisa right before the meeting. She came in. So does anyone have any questions or discussion on this item? If not, can we please have a roll call vote on Resolution 25-06, which is confirming the appointment of Lisa Vincent as our Deputy City Clerk?
Ms. Quidnow,
Aye.
Mr. Fields,
Aye.
Mr. Waters,
Aye.
Ms. Curler,
Aye.
Ms. Schmager.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Look forward to working with you, Lisa. Okay.
Congratulations.
Our next item is Resolution 25-07, which is a conditional use request from Sal and Laura Miosi. Misty, would you read that full title for us, please?
City Council Resolution 25-07, conditional use permit declarations and findings. Petitioner Salvatore and Laura Miosi on behalf of owner Salvatore and Laura Miosi Trust. Conditional use permit for excavation, fill, and grading within 300 feet of the shoreline of Rock Lake, 815 Ray Street, Lake Mills, Wisconsin. Parcel number 246-0713-1113-040.
Thank you. Would anyone like to make a motion, or would you like to hear from staff first?
Let's hear from staff.
Okay. Can I turn it over to our zoning administrator, Troy Evenson? Good evening.
Sure. Good evening, council. So at first glance, this looks like a pretty standard conditional use. There's some excavating for a patio, a 300 square foot patio within 300 feet of the overall high water mark. The unique situation with this one is that our city sewer and water utilities run underneath that property, and it actually runs right underneath the existing patio and underneath the proposed addition. We had quite a bit of discussion with this with staff and sewer and water department, Department of Public Works, and kind of deciding in a perfect world we'd have an easement there on 15 feet on either side of those utilities, that if we had to get in there, we could get in and legally take out whatever we needed to, make corrections, replacements, repairs, and then be on our way. There is a easement there that Dan was able to locate, but it's not it's not going to do us a whole lot of good. There's already an existing patio, so our thought process, or my thought process, was a small added patio wouldn't really slow us down if we had to get in there and do some maintenance and repairs with, excavation equipment anyway. It's not a concrete pad, it's not a deck or an addition of any sort. So we came up with a resolution that acknowledges it so that the property owner knows it, the city, is understanding that it's there, and that if there was ever going to be something that had to be repaired, that the property owners would be responsible for any sort of destruction that was done during the process.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Evenson about this proposal? And I'll just add that this was recommended unanimously by the Plan Commission. There was a public hearing, and there was no commenting. No one spoke during the public hearing. And the resolution contains some detailed conditions that ensure that the city can, as you described, Troy, that the city can get in to the site and would not be responsible, for damage to the property if the city needed to access those utilities. So it does seem to give us some good protection.
I did misspeak. I meant to say that he did not find an easement, that he did find a CSM that shows the utilities. So I do want to correct myself that there was not an actual recorded easement. That's the reason this one's a little more unique, that we're moving forward without an easement. I'm sorry about that.
I think there's
Got it.
a point of clarity to be had there. There is no recorded easement document. An easement certainly exists. It's either a prescriptive or a constructive easement. Those utilities have been there at least 50 years. We have a right to access and to protect the utilities. The utilities serve the adjacent and adjoining properties. So an easement does exist as a matter of law. I think that this resolution does do an effective job of kind of restating what our goals in allowing this conditional use permit would be in securing a right to access if necessary. We've heard from the Public Works Department regarding the likelihood that we ever actually repair or replace in that location. It sounds like it's pretty light, not going to happen. The other thing of consideration here is the footprint of the proposed improvements. They're not pouring a big slab or a pad or anything like that. They're engaging in putting block at grade mostly. So it didn't seem like the type of improvement that would interfere in the event that we had to. So we're just kind of exercising a little bit of discretion here and decided that it was probably an allowable use, and they're working with the building inspector and city staff to make sure that we have a reasonable plan moving forward. And so that's kind of where staff comes from with regard to its recommendation for approval.
If I could ask, I guess, a follow-up to that. I'm not sure if this is exactly what you said, Dan, but would it be fair to say, typically utilities are going to be within the street, and so these are older utilities that are in a sort of an unusual location, and if there was some significant work that needed to be done, we would probably relocate them? Would that be fair to say?
I think that's the most likely solution. You'll see around Rock Lake that there are numerous locations, especially on the west side of Lake in the old Rock Lake Sanitary District that the city Public Works Department, Wastewater Department specifically took over and are operating, that there is a significant amount of public infrastructure, specifically wastewater, that runs very close to the shoreline around Rock Lake and serves properties from the shoreline in rather than the road towards the shoreline. It's more contemporary these days to install such infrastructure within rights of ways. Ray Street is a relatively old road in the city of Lake Mills, and that's just not how this portion of our wastewater and water that serves that area was designed and installed. Current staff certainly didn't do that. I think it was far more common when this was installed to do it in this manner. We're always improving, and I think in the event that this did fail, it would be rather likely that they would relocate such utilities towards the rights of way. So.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion on this item?
I'll make a motion to approve City Council Resolution 25-07, conditional use permit for excavating, fill, and grade within 300 feet of the shoreline of Rock Lake at 815 Ray Street.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Waters and a second by Ms. Quednow. Is there any further questions or discussion? Okay, seeing none, Misty, can we have a roll call vote, please, on City Council Resolution 25-07?
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Ms. Schmager?
Aye.
Ms. Goodnow?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Okay, our next agenda item is Resolution 25-08, which is regarding an intergovernmental agreement with the Town of Lake Mills for fire protection services. Misty, would you read that full title for us?
City Council Resolution 25-08, resolution authorizing an intergovernmental agreement for the provision of fire protection and inspection services by the City of Lake Mills to a portion of the Town of Lake Mills.
Thank you. Let's have the staff discussion of this as well before we take a motion.
We're currently on an automatically one-year renewal of our fire service contract with the town of Lake Mills. And so this extends our relationship through 2030, until the end of 2030, and then would continue on an automatically renewing basis if no termination notice was given or if an extension was not reached. There are minor changes from the relationship we've had over the last many years, decades with the town of Lake Mills. One is that there is in there under the notice section that prior to my initial presentation to the city council for the budget, that we will send them the preliminary fire department budget ahead of time and schedule a time to sit down and go through the budget so that they're aware of what's being presented to city council. There is a reference to EMS in that it notes that there will be that there is a separate agreement controlling the EMS relationship. Other than that, updates, most of it has stayed the same. Most dates have stayed the same. Obligations have stayed the same. The funding formula hasn't changed as far as their contribution to the fire department or how that is calculated. So it is largely an extension of the relationship we've enjoyed, with a few minor tweaks and changes, just to reflect current practices, procedures, and communication efforts.
Thank you. Are there any questions regarding this proposal? I have two quick questions. One is, has the town of Lake Mills voted on this yet?
They have not voted on it. They did meet on it. A draft was sent to them. I did meet with Jim Hines and discussed their feedback on it and incorporated some minor changes into it to their satisfaction, but I anticipate approval at their town board meeting next week.
Great, thank you. And then my second question is, I'm pretty sure this is the case, but maybe you can confirm, is the fire coverage map the same map as the map that we've approved for providing emergency medical services?
It is.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if there's no further questions or discussion, can I get a motion for Resolution 25-08?
I'll move to approve Resolution 25-08, a resolution authorizing the intergovernmental agreement for the provision of fire protection and inspection services by the City of Lake Mills to a portion of the Town of Lake Mills.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Field, seconded by Mr. Waters. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, can we please have a roll call vote on Resolution 25-08?
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Ms. Curler?
Aye.
Ms. Schmager?
Aye.
Ms. Goodnow?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Okay, our last item under City Council business is discussion and possible action on the city manager performance review process, and this one was carried over from our last meeting, and we had a couple of items that were attached to our last meeting's agenda that Mary Schmager prepared, so I will turn it over to you to lead the discussion.
Well, thank you. We had just a brief discussion, if you recall, regarding some possible improvements to the performance process last fall. And so I took a just a draft stab of, I'm hoping you have the materials from the last meeting regarding a few small number of items that I noted for needing improvement. One of them is that we all were so very grateful to have the accomplishment report from Drake. But what we desired it possibly to be before we actually had an opportunity to do our own rating. And so that was item number one. The second topic that we had discussed was our 41 rating competencies appeared to be quite, quite extensive. And so I have a proposal I'll talk about regarding a few options for discussion. And then while I was working on those two feedback areas, I also took a look at the process handbook and employment agreement and thought if there were other things that we may want to entertain, now might be a nice time to do a draft update and just do it in one fell swoop. So I'm going to start with the first, I'm going to start at the back and go to Appendix A, which is actually the form itself, the rating form itself. And I wanted to propose that we continue to use the International City County Management Association, the ICMA core competencies. I feel that those were put into place for a strong reason, and I think there's a lot of work goes into having association-based core competencies, and so I propose that we still utilize those. And so you'll note, if you had a chance to review the revision that I had put into place, essentially I took all of the ICMA competencies that were in the performance rating sheet last year and just reorganized them into a smaller number of categories. So it was using the exact same information. So my item 2 on Appendix A is to actually propose reducing the number of rating categories from the 41 to either 16 categories. And so they were the bold, or the line itemed 1 through 16 on Appendix A in the materials I had supplied, or roll up even one level higher and go to 6 categories, which were the bolded category headers. And so I wanted just to start with a conversation regarding that aspect, but then I wanted to close with 2 additional suggestions because it may help in helping the conversation. Adding a rating category titled Achieving Results that would have goal and objective development and then results as a part of our rating program moving forward, and then adding a section titled Professional Development. And this was something that I thought, as I've learned about a lot of the extra learning that Drake does to advance his knowledge set, and I know he's working towards some advanced credentials, I feel it's important that we professionally recognize and document those. And so I suggested that we think about how we can also give input as a part of our performance discussion process, but that we actually then have a nice formal recognition regarding knowing that he's spending time, the city manager, but Drake in this case now, to develop and to build on skill sets to be just adding more value to his role. So Appendix A, those are my 4 items, and so just look for discussion and feedback, and be happy to take all feedback and do another revision or draft as well.
I noticed that you have some other items on your first memo, but would you like to talk about Appendix A first and have that
was my
discussion,
thought.
or do you
Talk
want
about
to go through?
Appendix A, or unless you'd like me to go through and talk process. The Appendix A was just the form, and so I thought I would start with the.
Yeah, well,
Those are most of our issues were there.
Because I think that was kind of the primary focus of a lot of our feedback when we were going through the process the last time. So does anybody have any specific comments or feedback that they'd like to share on Mary's proposal?
Great.
So as I go deeper into the Appendix A, I get the 16 categories, and then it looks like it's broken down into bullet points from there. Are those bullet points to be rated, or
The bullet points are the descriptors that were a part of the ICMA materials, and so they are just to help define what the category, like being fair, honest, and ethical in all personal, professional relationships and activities. Those are
Right.
the actions underneath describe that. So in the case of personal effectiveness, we would either rate on all of the personal effectiveness as a category by itself, or we would rate on the three different subcomponents: personal, professional integrity, equity, and inclusion, the components underneath.
So
The
we'd be
three
rating
categories.
from 1 to 5 based on the category, basically.
Yes, the example that I provided, I know, is that we would be rating on the 16, so I only had one
Right.
rating, well, excuse me, on the 6, because I only put one rating per big category. If we were to choose 16, you'd have a rating under each one of those personal effectiveness sub-bullets.
Okay.
I could have done an A and a B. I'm not sure how confusing I would have made it, but.
So
Will
for
you
example,
help to clarify?
if we look at that third page of your proposal, that's got the category personal effectiveness, and then there are three bold statements under those. So if I understand you right, you're saying we could choose to just rate on that high level, capital letter, personal effectiveness, and do one rating for all three things that are under there?
Yes.
Or we could choose to rate each of the three individually,
Correct.
that would be the 16.
Correct.
Both of which would be less than 41.
Correct.
So-
Correct.
Be a
And
little bit
six
more
is- And
compiled.
6 is a real large, going from 41 to 6, I felt maybe too drastic of a move and really broad, but there are some pros to that, and so that's why I thought I'd provide options, because the definitions are there, but the 16 would actually be quite a big improvement also to the 41, and then it would relate to
Right.
each one of the other dark categories.
Michelle?
First of all, thank you for doing this, because that took a lot of time, and I'm sure, thank you to city staff. I'm going to guess that Dan was helpful in this, as well as Drake, to get you all of this information, as well as how it all plays out in the end. I like the idea of 16 because it gives us enough where we were recognizing when we were going through this process that there were certain repetitive questions. And what you did, which was extremely helpful, is to consolidate those repetitive questions into very specific categories. I don't think it would be wise for us to go to 6, because that's just a little too broad. But having them broken down into 16 gives us a little bit more play in being able to identify specific behaviors that we want to highlight or that we want to discuss as a possible need to improve. Not that he has any that I can remember right now, but just having this be still concise enough that it might expedite the process, which is always a nice thing, and not have us repeating ourselves and wondering, why am I answering this question more than one time? So my vote is to do 16.
Great. Any other comments, feedback? Great, go ahead. Yeah.
I would concur with what Michelle said there, that when we had the 41, I would probably write comments on about 16 to 20 items. And this would allow us to maybe focus in on these 16, write comments maybe on all 16, and be a little bit more concise and productive with the review. So this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I would echo that as well. I like the 16. I think 6 is too small. We can always look at refining it even further. You know, we adopted this right before Drake was hired, so we've had a chance to use our 41 question process 2 times, and I think it's always can be, you know, a dynamic thing that we're always improving, but improving this Appendix A, I think, would be a big step in the right direction, and doing this 16 hopefully would give enough specificity to Drake, because I think we want our feedback to him to be meaningful. And if it's just in 6 categories, it might be too generalized
Too
to
broad.
really give much meaning. I don't want to speak for Drake. We can ask you your thoughts as well. One other thing I wanted to comment on is the training plan or the professional development plan. I agree with you that I think we're aware that Drake, actively pursues professional growth and development opportunities, but we also want to recognize that and encourage that. So I like the idea that that's being documented. And I mean, I can't think of a job that I was ever in where there wasn't some kind of a training plan that was expected and tracked and documented. And so, but, we leave that up to him as a professional to, both in response to our feedback and his own self-awareness to decide what he, would like to work on, but it gives us a chance to recognize it. Great.
The only one thing I would probably add is at the bottom of this section, it has city manager input to city council. I guess I'd like to see, I know that through the whole process, we're giving input to the city manager, but maybe at the bottom, we should have a section where city council can give input to the city manager more in an open format that maybe wasn't covered under the 16 questions.
Okay.
Page prior?
One more. Right there.
That's the professional development input.
I interpreted the professional development input to not just be about him seeking outside training or anything like that, but just as far as being able to identify things that we feel he should do differently. But maybe I'm misinterpreting the vocabulary used there. So when we think of professional development, we're thinking of outside training. Is that accurate?
Well, it can be outside in training. It also can be just something on the job that is different, whatever it may be.
Okay.
It may have more.
Serving on
more
a county team or,
Yes,
yeah,
more
some
written
other kind of-
correspondence. I'm not sure, but it can be a formal training, or it can be just something an action-oriented, something that's personal,
Sure.
that could be worked on.
So
Greg, if I'm understanding you, you're asking for where in this process would we give more generalized feedback to the city manager? Is that what you're?
Yeah, and I recognize that there's 6 different categories, and under each category, there's an open comment section. But is there comment that you want to give maybe that isn't aligned in those 6 sections
So
for
a
some
general
reason?
comment, it's almost an overall comment, almost a summary comment, maybe perhaps at the beginning or the end, where you just can say a general overall
That's my thought,
comment.
yeah.
I can add that, that'd be,
Okay.
yep.
Well, when I reflect on the reviews that we've done, both in the time that I've been on the council with Steve Wilkie and with Drake, we have a confidential meeting and we do have some open-ended discussion during that. So I think I hope that would, that would definitely continue. I had a question about the city manager input to city council, which I would welcome, and I hope that we would all be open to. I'm wondering, from a process perspective, if you're thinking that is something that we would be asking the city manager to put in writing, and if so, is that something the city manager wants to do?
Shall I move on to the handbook? So I think that's in the handbook.
Well, this is page
that-
11 of
Okay.
the Appendix A, so that's why
Okay,
I was kind of
okay.
bringing it up in that context. So, I mean, if these are questions that we're going to discuss verbally, I'll put myself in Drake's shoes, or I'll ask Drake if he wants to comment, but, if that's just to guide a verbal discussion, I think that's one thing. If we're asking him to put that in writing, I think that may be something he's maybe not as comfortable with. So, Drake, do you have any thoughts on that?
I guess first I'd say I can accommodate either one the council would like. I think that the more documents you create, the more records you must maintain for an extended period of time, which can, cause difficulties as far as filing and what things should remain between the city council and city manager relationship and what things should be between the city council, the city manager, and the public, and what level of comfort we may have in that process. I I typically operate that everything I write down, everything I produce is viewable and by the public at large, and so I'm not necessarily, concerned about, my ability to, write things professionally and in such a way that I would not be worried about anything that would go in, but I think that may be up to the council's comfort level as far as what level of candor you're expecting and what types of conversations you'd like to have with me right now or whomever your city manager may be.
Well, thank you for that, and I guess I think it's a good reminder that anything that any of us would put in writing as a part of this process, may be considered a public record. I like the questions on page 11 of the draft, updated Appendix A, but I guess I would prefer to see those just more in the process manual than as in the form as something that we're asking Drake to put in writing to us, so that it can just be encouraging an ongoing dialogue. And he might answer those questions differently with each of us as individuals than he might with us as a council as well. And so I think I for one would like to encourage each one of us to have that, one-on-one dialogue with Drake, but not put it in a framework where it all has to be in writing. If that makes sense. So I guess that would be my thoughts on that.
It
page
actually,
11.
I pulled the questions right out of the current,
Maybe that's
items.
why.
Yeah, so that's why it's
I liked
familiar.
them.
I just put it on a
It looked
page.
familiar,
I
okay.
pulled it out and I made it more formal because I don't want to lose it. It's embedded in the process, but I don't know if that was as much of a focus area because I like how it's written in here that in the introduction, the success of the city manager is linked to the success of city council and vice versa. And so I felt it just as important that we give the city manager feedback, that the city manager can also say, well, I would have loved to have gotten to X, Y, Z, but you weren't clear on this particular goal. And so feedback, I just think I liked the way it was written as being a two-way. So I pulled it out just to make sure we don't lose it, but it can be that we just keep it, or maybe carve it out a little more formally in the handbook itself rather than making it a form.
Yeah, and I don't know how others feel, but that's just how I feel. So I don't want it to be on the form as something that we're expecting our city manager to put in writing.
Yeah, the questions are on page 3 and the purpose of the handbook on the very first page. The 3 questions on that sheet that looks like a formal form are just noted right there. So as long as, we just are intentional of not forgetting that we could use some feedback too. I'm not sure we need a formal form or that we need it in writing. Just that perhaps we have to ensure that we do it.
I agree with you, Lisa. I don't think we need a form.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I can go either way.
Okay. Steve, any other thoughts? You have a lot
No,
of
I think I could go
experience.
either way. When we have our sit-down meetings with them, these are good questions to review.
Yeah.
And I do like the 16 points versus the 41. It kind of hits all the topics we want to get, and we get rid of the repetitiveness.
Yeah. Okay, any other feedback on Appendix A? Okay, so you had a few other things then on the handbook.
So the handbook, so I propose that we just flip steps 1 and 2 in the handbook and ask for the input from the city manager, their evaluation first. And so then we can use that as input for our own rating process. And so I would just propose we flip those 2. I'm going to come back to number 2 in the handbook because that is just an outside suggestion. The 3rd one we've already talked about, that is giving formal input from the city manager to city council, and I have noted we're not going to have a formal form, and we'll ensure though that it's in the purpose, it's not as clearly defined in the steps, but I think it's covered so we can ensure that doesn't get lost. And then the last idea is just, it is maybe not common in here or in public government, but getting feedback from administration for the city manager's performance. And I'm not, it's just something I thought I would bring forward. It's often done on an annual basis in business. It can be done on every other year. It cannot be done at all. And I think it gives you just a different perspective of input from people that actually are on the job day in and day out and being a part of the team. And so I just wanted to add that as an idea. And you can do it in a lot of different ways. You could do one or two competencies. It can be open-ended. It can be do more of, less of. It can be just make a comment. And so I wanted to add that as another just point of discussion. So those are the three. And that's not in the handbook. So that would be a handbook modification. It's not something that's noted as an action.
Any feedback on those handbook ideas?
Can I ask a question about the first thing? I want to make sure I understand. You said the city manager evaluation is the first step, and that is that there would be the input, hold on, I gotta pull it up, the input to the city council assessment process. So what does that look like in the procedure of everything? What does that mean?
The
I
city
guess?
manager's self-assessment,
The self-assessment. So we would see the self-assessment before
First.
we evaluate him?
before we actually fill out the actual rating form.
Okay. And
The feedback that I heard when we were doing our dialogue on the performance process is that when Drake had administered his document of his accomplishments, it came after we had already completed our rating. And that was a point of conversation. We all said, wow, it would have been great to have had that information prior to us filling out the rating form. And so I was just going to my suggestion was then let's just flip and ask Drake to give us his self-assessment and his materials prior to us opening up and doing our performance rating.
so I agree with the idea of him giving us the list of accomplishments. I think that's a really nice feature, and it really helps bring things into perspective because, like Lisa was saying, the day in and day out, we don't have to see that. We're kind of limited in some ways to what we see. So it's good to have that list, and it's good to be able to reflect on those things. My concern is that if we see his ratings prior to our ratings, it may change how we rate.
Okay.
And I'm speaking for myself because I remember vividly in this process how when I saw other people's ratings and then I would look at my own, I would question, did I give too much or too little, right? And that was the conversation that we were ending up having all together, which isn't a bad thing to do. But I think it's important that we can look at how we rate as a council and how he rates himself and talk about that differential, because that was something that you had into the spreadsheet. And I think it was really interesting to use that as a conversation point.
I really appreciate that you brought that up, Michelle, and I think this is reflecting too that there's kind of two things that we got from Drake last year. So our our handbook talks about a self-assessment. So Drake filled out the same 41-question evaluation form that we all filled out. And he did that at the same time that each of us was doing it. And then when we got together without Drake to discuss our ratings, we saw his and we could compare them to ours. But then when he came to our meeting with us, we had this wonderful multiple pages of all the things that he had accomplished in the prior year that, were maybe things that some of us weren't aware of, and that we wanted to recognize. So I'm almost wondering if we just want to add that accomplishment. And I don't know, Drake, I would ask you, if that's, obviously that was important to you to produce that, and if that's something that you feel like you can commit to producing that, summary of annual accomplishments every year, I think that was very valuable to the council.
Yeah, I certainly can produce it every year. The only clarification I'd offer is it's the city's accomplishments. They're not all
Yeah.
my individual ones.
Duly noted, yes. We've got a lot of great staff getting important work done. Yes, Steve?
Yeah, more is accomplished. I'd say it's more of a year in review. It's,
yeah.
that's kind of what he presented to us was the last year in review from his perspective and all the things that they're working on. That's the document that would be really beneficial to us in advance. And like Michelle was saying, having us do the documents together, the assessment, I think that's important for the 5 council people to do their own and then lay his down afterwards and compare. Because I always find it very eye-opening to see how well we line up with him a lot of times, and there's very few differences. And a lot of it is perspective from where you're coming from. But that year in review would have been very helpful in advance.
I really like framing it that way too, because sometimes it's accomplishments and sometimes it may be like there were barriers or, unexpected things that came up that impacted our ability to make accomplishments, and so those are all, and you did that last year, Drake, highlighted some of the things that were, impacted the ability to run the city. Yeah. Great.
I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I think I'm going to agree with Michelle again.
Come on now. I can't always be wrong.
In the business world, or at least for my business world, I do this three times a year with my employees. And they fill out the information, and I fill out the information at the same time. And then we come together and we talk about it. And it's kind of neat because sometimes I put in things that they don't, they put in things that I don't. And then we just kind of edit the document as we talk. And then one report goes in, one report submitted. But it gives me a chance to write up my own evaluation of the employee without getting their input and then still having the ability to go back and edit things. So I like having the ability to do it without seeing what's being said on the other side. So, was that kind of where you were at?
Yep. So it sounds like we're sort of saying, it's not so much changing the order of the steps, but it's almost sort of adding.
It's adding.
We're asking the city manager to give us like a year in review that we can use as we're individually doing our ratings. And then we would still offer the opportunity for the city manager to do a self-assessment using the same rating form. And then we would, consider all that together as we're finalizing our evaluation. Everybody does that feel comfortable to you, Mary?
Yes, it
in
does.
terms
So
of
I was, I was not aware that the memo that Drake had completed was not part of the evaluation form, if you will, Appendix A. And so I 100% agree. I really like the commentary and the thoughts around individually we all rate, but have in advance a step 0 where the city manager completes a year in review, and I really like that phrase as well. That would be in advance of step 1, which is all of us completing the individual rating. So I think that's a nice solid improvement.
Yeah.
I like that.
Something that occurs to me with a shorter number of questions, and I don't want to speak for others, but I guess for myself, I probably would not need 4 weeks to complete my evaluation, which is what our current process, gives council members pretty much a full month to get that done. And I think it's a little easier when there's a smaller number of questions. I mean, I think we all will still take advantage of the opportunity to put narrative comments in addition to the rating, but there might be able to be, a little opportunity to tighten that up too.
Do you have a recommendation on, while we are making a revision on changing that, or do you want to keep it at 4 weeks and?
Well, and I mean, we
It
could
actually
always
specifically
keep it
says
4
4
weeks,
weeks.
but I'm just reflecting that, maybe it will be, the whole process will be a little bit more efficient for each of us.
I just want to remind you that that's about the same time that we're talking budgets.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more on our plates at that time.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that because I was the last person to give you an input. But what I'm saying is that there is more going on at that point in the year that we should be sensitive to.
Yeah, and for our city manager as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it's a busy time for all of us to be doing this on top of it, so. Yeah, maybe just leave it, I guess.
Leave it 4 weeks?
Yeah.
Okay. Before we go to the last, the item number 2 in the handbook, that was team member or staff input, I'm curious if there were any other improvements or changes that you desire to talk about outside of what I had gathered in my notes to add to the agenda this evening.
I don't know why I'm so vocal today, so I'm going to apologize. I think, to be honest with you, I think it's kind of a difficult line to walk with getting input from administrative staff that report to Drake, for a couple of reasons. One being that if they even put things in there that are anonymous, it could be something he learned about or understands, and not that he would do this, but maybe some other city manager would use that information in a way that isn't
Appropriate,
appropriate.
yeah. Like retaliation of some sort, or to your point there.
Right,
yeah,
right.
Yep.
I know that, I don't know if it was this year or if it was last year, that we did kind of can't think of the word. Informally, thank you, kind of gather data from administrative staff just to get an idea of how they think things are going. But it was never something to the point of rating. And that has, to me, a more value than gathering that data that could potentially turn into data that is that could be seen anywhere. So I would rather keep it to where we are not necessarily gathering that data unless it's through conversation. It's not, because I don't want, in my role where my administrator is evaluating me, the last thing he's going to do is ask my students how I'm doing. I mean, he could, but it wouldn't be the same. Do you know what I mean? So it's just, it's a really scary line to walk.
I agree with you, Michelle, and I think the way that I have approached this in prior years is just verbally talking.
Yeah.
To department heads, and particularly, each of us is on a board. You can talk to whoever, your board liaison is there, Public Works or Grounds and Facilities or whoever that might be. We're probably each regularly talking to the clerk and the city attorney and the finance director. So there's opportunities for us to ask those questions in ways where we can gather information without it being formal, without it being in writing, to the extent that, the staff members feel comfortable talking with us. So that's how I would prefer to do it. I'd be open to learning more about if there are other municipalities that have a process like that, but I guess I don't feel ready to go there right now.
Right, I agree.
Anybody else have thoughts on that, item number 2 for the handbook? Steve, have you had anything in your managerial experience where there's that kind of
I would
input?
agree that I think it'd be better if we just basically talked to the department heads one-on-one, or if there was an issue, I'd hope that they would come to us or felt comfortable enough to come talk to us.
Great.
I can support informal. I think informal actually works well. It just, I thought I would just bring it forward as more
I
formality
appreciate
needed.
that.
yeah.
Yeah,
Now's the
and
time to
you've-
ask the question.
Yeah, no, it's good because, and you've had that experience in your professional world, so it's good to, just bring it
And there are a
forward
lot
and
of
talk about
cons,
it.
to your point, Michelle, because there's, depending on, a lot of cons, and there could be some pros too.
There
That's
could.
why I brought it up, there are pros and cons, so.
And it's part
Always.
of our responsibility in we have one employee collectively, so it's part of our responsibility each, as individuals to learn as much as we can and, to help give him good feedback.
So then I'm going to summarize. I have for Appendix A, we have agreed for moving towards 16 categories, including keeping professional development as a separate section, adding an overall comment section. Let's see, in the handbook, adding step 0, or rearranging to have a year in review, which can be inclusive of the city manager and the city's accomplishments. And that would be before we do our rating, and we are not changing the order of the rating. We will rate independently so that we're not changing that order. Nothing formal on staff input, and we're going to remove the input to city council as a formal form. I have as our notes for today, and I'll be happy to clear all this up and work with Dan on making sure that any Appendix A and any material changes, that we reconcile those together and that Dan then has that information. And I
Great.
thank you for the conversation, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to take this
thank you
on as
for-
an improvement for us, so.
Thank you for digging into this and bringing so many good ideas forward. So Dan, would you recommend that this just be sort of packaged as an updated handbook, and that that could be the form that we would adopt it at a future meeting?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so there may be some edits in the handbook itself, and then the Appendix A is sort of the primary thing, is a different Appendix A. Fantastic. Well, thank you again, Mary. I guess I did want to, I think you have maybe shared with us previously, but I think you did also talk with Drake specifically, so you've got some of his input in some of the information that you put together. So thank you for doing that, too. Okay, any other comments on this agenda item? Okay, if not, we are finished with our council business, so we're on to recommendations for future agendas. And just on the topic of performance review, I was looking back to see, and we usually do a mid-year check-in. That wouldn't be till April, so just keeping that in the back of my mind. So that would be normally in late April that we would do that with Drake. And then we have our Sandy Beach Park work session has been rescheduled to March 6th, which is a Thursday. So we'll look forward to that. Anything else, Drake, that you're aware of for our next meeting?
Not for the next meeting. My presence will be different over the next few months. So just keep that in mind. In the event that I'm not available or not present, Chief Steve Schroeder will be acting in my stead with obviously significant help from the entire senior leadership team. At this point, I don't know which meetings I might be missing or when I'll be absent, but there will be undoubtedly some or several. So I will keep you as informed as I can as early as possible. And it probably will come in starts and stops. So I'm not far, but I'll be a little busy.
No new arrival yet, though?
No.
Okay,
no.
we're still waiting. Okay, we're still waiting. Sounds good. Council members, any other agenda items or topics that you want to bring forward?
Not tonight.
Okay, all right. Well, hearing nothing further, then we'll move to our last item, which is adjournment. So I will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.